Thanks. And thank you all. And I apologize. Some are officially in our house, so there's going to be a lot of activity. I'm trying to find quiet spots. I might have to move as I try to avoid kids and whatnot. But thank you all for joining the Advocacy Workgroup of the Vital Community Steering Committee. Today, why don't we first go around, just because I do see a new name on the screen, and just kind of give our name and affiliation and something we're looking forward to doing this weekend, this beautiful kind of summer weekend. So I will start. I'm Brooke Freeland. I'm co-facilitating this work group with Sara, Kobylenski, and I am here representing the Couch Family Foundation. And I am looking forward to maybe playing some tennis this weekend. So I don't get to do it often. So I'm hoping the weather stays dry and I can make some time for that. And I will pass it to Sunny, who's next to me.
I am Sunny McFeetris, the director of the Dartmouth College Childcare Center, and I also represent Dartmouth College. And I am looking forward to buying a new washer and dryer this weekend. And I will pass it to Michael.
Good morning, I'm Michael Bennett, also with the Couch Family Foundation. What am I looking forward to this weekend? I guess the one thing is my son's coming to visit tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to seeing him. So that'll be good. And I'm going to pass it to Sara. Sara Kobylenski.
Hi, sorry for the voice. Also with the Couch Family Foundation, and assuming that I continue to sound better by the time we get to Sunday, we are anticipating a visit from a young local musician friend who's always a joy to spend some time with.
And why don't I pass it to Sara Jackson?
Sara Jackson with Vital Communities. I'm hoping to go strawberry picking if pick your own places have opened up here. I'm not sure yet. And then some of you know I used to live in the Middle East for many years, and a friend from Oman and her family are coming to visit for a couple days on Sunday, coming Sunday. So haven't seen her for years and looking forward to it. And I'll pass it to Rachel.
I'm Rachel Williams. I'm the Childcare Financial Assistance Program Supervisor at the Family Place. And this weekend, I'll be helping my friend move fixtures into his new store. Looking forward to that. Elizabeth, have you gone? I'll pass to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Rachel. Nice to meet you all. I'm Elizabeth Ash. I am the owner, CEO, and general manager of Fit Kids Childcare and River Valley Club in Lebanon. I'm also one of 7 commissioners on the New Hampshire Commission for Human Rights. I'm really happy to be joining this group, a really cool bunch of people, and thank you for having me. I will pass to who has not gone. Tammy, how about you?
And you know what, Tammy is surrounded by kiddos, so she usually keeps her mic off, but she put her contact information in the chat.
And she also said she was looking forward to a ride with her husband on their motorcycle.
Awesome.
Oh, I forgot to say what I'm looking forward to. Yesterday, for the first time in 14 days, I tested negative for COVID. So I'm looking forward to feeling better this weekend. I have a terrible cough. So I'll try to mute myself as much as possible for that.
And then Amy has not gone.
I'm Amy Brooks, Executive Director, Early Care and Education Association. And I just got back from a little lake trip, so I'm looking forward to cleaning my house because it's a disaster area. And I think everybody has gone, maybe Andra?
Hauer, I am for the next couple of hours or something. I'm the interim project manager for the Vital Communities Early Care and Education Initiative, and I am the executive director of Equal Access to Broadband, new identity for me. And this week, looking forward to continuing to tie up loose ends and spending as much time in my yard as possible, even if it involves weeding and things that I find tedious. I just want to be outside as much as possible.
Great. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to try to keep us kind of on agenda and on schedule this morning, because we do have Matt Levin joining us at 10:15, I believe. So I just want to be mindful of that and kind of put it out there ahead of time. But so want to give the opportunity for anyone in the group who has any updates, any share outs. It's always helpful to hear what the other two working groups have been doing, the facilities and the recruitment retention. So if we get kind of an update there, that would be helpful as well.
I can offer a little bit of an update, and Andra, hope you'll jump in. She and I met with Emily Tenenbaum earlier this week from Let's Grow Kids. Emily is on the ECE steering committee, and she mentioned that they're going to be looking for an endorsement of their Vermont platform from businesses and other groups, and of course they're interested in knowing if our group would want to sign on to that. Andra, I don't know if she's sent that yet. I don't think I've seen it, but at any rate, that'll be something that I think we'll put before this committee, as well as this work group, excuse me, as well as the steering committee as a whole. And then the other thing she mentioned is that they're working the sort of Upper Valley piece of their Vermont work. They're coordinating with Simon Pierce to have a business event in late August. And Jay Benson from Simon Pierce Gallery has already signed on to this endorsement. Clay Adams from Mascoma Bank is a supporter. I don't know if they're going to become an endorser, and I don't quite know the difference yet, but at any rate, it's she described it as a sort of a business peer-to-peer event to get people talking about the importance of childcare as a workforce issue. And I think it's August 31st. She invited Vital Communities to attend, and I think wants us to help spread the word to businesses in the region. So once she sends more information by email, I'll update all of you, and certainly hope that we can have a good business contingent talking about why they need to be supportive, both from an advocacy level as well as whatever they're doing for the communities in which they operate and for their employees. So I'll share more as we get more. Andra, is there anything I'm missing from that you can think of?
No, just that I would just add that you know, that Let's Grow Kids is really looking to, because they have this sort of like finish date coming up, and they're very mindful of the impact that they've had on the community with their work and things, like they're very keen to make sure they're weaving in with any local initiatives and coalitions and things as they kind of hand things off. So, you know, I don't know how else to, like, their approach is very much one of, we want to be doing this together with you, not for you. And they're really mindful of working out the details of that and having that be the felt sense for everybody. So.
Yeah, we also talked a little bit, she was mentioning the importance of consistent messaging, that they're concerned about, you know, what they're hearing from some legislators who are saying, you know, we know this is important, but we're getting lots of sort of mixed messages. So hoping that we can be consistent in, you know, what we're saying to Vermont legislators. And I did talk very briefly, I think it came up at one of the steering committee meetings. In fact, Sara, your point about one of the sort of niches that we might want to focus more on is that administrative advocacy, which I don't think is anything that Let's Grow Kids does, but the idea of working with sort of the bureaucracy and in helping centers and home-based providers to get access to the resources that are out there, or, you know, dealing with regulatory issues and that sort of thing, making it a more user-friendly system.
Will we have an opportunity to perhaps to meet with Emily again to see if they can be sure that they're sensitive to the bi-state nature of this area as they do their work on the 31st for this event? It will be, if we can work with them to have language that they'd like us to use, but language that fits us in a bi-state way, that would be wonderful. That would be a major meaning for this committee, as in terms of having the kind of a framework from which to be advocating. But I think we have to be thoughtful, and it may not be, it's how do we take the Let's Grow Kids language and use it to the extent that it fits here, and not change anything from it, but also not go to places that don't really fit here.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the administrative, that what I'm realizing is that there's a lot of work going on, and it's particularly Building Bright Futures on the Vermont side that is looking at that area about governance and administrative structures and things that that it doesn't fit today's agenda, but we could get back to during the course of the summer.
Great. Yeah, I love your idea about sort of a session. I think that would be very helpful with Let's Grow Kids before the late August event. Am I correct that Drake from Let's Grow Kids is usually at these meetings? And would she be the person to discuss this with, or should I ask Emily to come to one of these meetings, or what do you think would be useful?
Ask Emily whether whether she or Drake would be preferable to do this.
Okay, will do.
Thanks, Sarah. Any other updates from working group related updates? Amy, anything going on with the retention recruitment that?
Not, I don't think there's anything new from the last time we reported. Still working on some ideas.
Okay. Andra, do you want to share kind of about the community conversation in Lebanon and kind of reaching out to providers in Lebanon to be part of the conversation of what a new facility could look like, or kind of brainstorm concerns and possibilities?
Yeah. So the facilities and program models work group had come up with an idea to solve 4 specific issues in the Lebanon area. There's a couple of funding streams available for it. And Sean Mulholland, the city manager of Lebanon, was sort of spearheading this. And as the idea was sort of fleshed out a little bit, it would include, supporting at least 180 slots, focusing on infant and toddlers, possibility of after hours care, which has been a longstanding need, offering fair wages to staff, and then including some kind of workforce development, on-the-job training, mentoring component to it, so that it was also not just helping with retention in terms of the wages and things like that, but also, helping the area with recruitment and being able to recruit, qualified, ready staff. And what that group and the steering committee decided to do was to invite providers from across the Upper Valley together and discuss this idea, and sort of gauge what folks' capacity was to be partners in this, whether it was like actually providing some of the slots or some of the actual implementation of it, or saying, I don't have the capacity right now, or my business doesn't have the capacity right now, but I would like to be an advisor to this project. So really, really holding a collaborative conversation about it, and discussing the impact that such a program, whether it's compiled of a whole bunch of different programs or a whole new one is started, however that happens, but deciding together so that we can be mindful of how it could impact the ecosystem of ECE providers in the area. So for example, just one aspect of this, right? We know that one center offering wages that are much higher than other providers can afford to pay right now could have a very difficult impact on a business, an industry that already has a staff shortage. And we want to be sensitive to that, but also recognize like that is a problem, and that as we move forward with this whole initiative, there's going to be issues where there's uneven progress across this, and so we as part of the steering committee really wanted to be sure to put this idea out to the community, say this is something we would like to see happen. There's funding for it. There's even potentially a program with staff that could take this on, and we want to decide with you how we actually for some kind of package that ticks off these 4 boxes of identified need. So we don't have a date yet set for that meeting. It's going to be I will facilitate it with Sean Mulholland and possibly another member of the steering committee, in a way that's like allows folks to respond, to give feedback. It'll be recorded for anybody that can't attend. It'll be held in the evening to accommodate as many ECE typical schedules as possible, providers. We'll set a time period for event takes place and the recording goes out to say, here's other ways to give feedback. You might want to watch the recording again. You may have other thoughts a week or 2 after, even if you're able to attend it live. Very clear mechanism for giving feedback, and really having a productive, honest, transparent conversation about this. And part of this is just trying to solve a pretty complex problem with a bunch of different communities and some competing needs, unfortunately. So that's kind of what I have right now. I don't know if I missed anything or.
Yeah, no, and I'd add, I think kind of the big picture is trying to put a proposal together to the state for the allocation of some ARPA funding, some emergency relief funding, and what could that kind of package look like? So getting input from providers, and then putting together a plan to put forth to the state to try to draw down some ARPA funding to execute, recognizing that kind of the funding that we need to ask for is for one-time funds and not sustainable in the long term. So being mindful of that in the proposal.
Well, I can say I'm hoping that the meeting is after July 18th because I'll be in Alaska before then, and I really want to participate.
Noted. Thank you, Sunny, and have an amazing trip and no dialing in from Alaska.
Yeah, and I think we are looking at the latter part of July. I think that's the earliest we could pull this off.
Yeah. Right, and because there will be a staffing transition too, we just wanted to be mindful that we had vital communities and this work had kind of the staffing support to be thoughtful and to give providers enough time to get it on their calendar, to collect their thoughts, and to kind of be able to bring them their whole selves to the conversation.
Yeah, and just to say too that I sent out a message with all of this on it to as many providers as I have email addresses for in the Upper Valley area, and that includes family home and license centers. And if you know of any providers and somehow it got into their spam box, or they didn't read it, or whatever it is because they don't know me from Eve, which is totally understandable, let them know, and I can or let me know, I can resend it or whatever it is. But we want to make sure that everybody is that no one feels like they were not informed. It's really important to us that this is open, available, all that kind of stuff. So.
And incorporating feedback from both sides of the river, even though kind of this stems from the city of Lebanon, but definitely want input and insights from both sides of the river, because providers on both sides will ultimately be impacted, as well as families. Thanks, Andra. Any other updates the group would like to share?
Do we want to go back to the first agenda topic then, Brooke? Because I think that's really relevant to not having more updates right now, as we don't necessarily have the people who can bring us the updates right now.
Right, unfortunately. Yeah, and I can maybe share my screen. We have a kind of on the agenda a list of stakeholders, community members that we really want to cultivate and can re-engage in this conversation, and just wanted to quickly kind of brainstorm who on this call might have connections or willing to take the lead on outreach and inviting them back to this conversation. And let me see.
One other name that I wanted to check in on before we start with a new list is that Courtney Tanner, representing DHMC, had been part of this committee and had been active and then disappeared. And I contacted her again and talked with her, and she was apologetic, saying somehow it had fallen off of her calendar and she was not getting meeting notices. And so I had asked that our list be checked to be sure she was on it. But I don't see her here again today. So I'm just wondering if that list can be checked again to be sure she is getting noticed about the meeting.
Thanks, Sarah, for calling that out. All right. Why don't I share my screen and we can kind of, it's the names that were on the agenda, but we can maybe go through them together if we can see it. And I don't have the Google form up, so Andrew, I know you're kind of taking live notes, but so kind of starting the top, David Watts. We did just talk about Simon Pierce and their involvement with the Let's Grow Kids initiative, but it would be great to get them connected to this work as well.
I could reach out to him.
Okay.
because he's on our board.
Okay. And we can help, if you need help kind of outlining what the ask is, it's to bring more business representation to this advocacy work group, and to bring more business into the fold of this conversation. It was the business community that initiated this, that kind of waved the red flag around childcare crisis, and they've fallen off the conversation. And so we just want to kind of circle back and remind them that this work is happening, but they need to be an active participant as well.
It might be worth bringing in Amanda Charland, who's the new president or ED, I forget her title, general manager for the co-op. They have a wide range of employees, so probably a pretty wide range of childcare needs in terms of income capability. So just maybe tapping Amanda while she's new before she gets sucked in. And then I think she might well put Alan Reitz on the job. I don't know, but they're a significant player for us in town. And has somebody from Dartmouth Health been involved on one of the other committees? Because we're not seeing anybody from the hospital system here. And likewise from Dartmouth, I feel like we've struggled to get Dartmouth pulled in, but this is the advocacy committee. So I recognize there may be active representation in one of the other working committees. Brooke and Sara,
Julia Sunny is the designated representative of Rick Mills.
Okay, great.
In the same way that Courtney was designated by both Dan Jansen and Matt Hood.
Yep.
To represent the medical center. We
Okay.
also do have other Dartmouth College employees who have been part of the committee. Sonny, the name, the Cowley.
It's the work quality of life, work-life,
right.
whatever, balance committee. Yep.
We have representatives from there. They've been on committees too.
Oh, good. Okay, that's really important.
The medical center has been thin. And that's why I'm concerned that they haven't followed through on their commitment, to be blunt.
Yeah, they're really hard to reel in, Sara, on in many ways. So I don't know.
But I'm anxious if we're hearing that they're not hearing from us, I want to be sure that we can affirm that they are hearing from us before I say, you're hearing from us and not responding.
Yeah, and I don't see Courtney's name on the invites for today's meeting. So I can.
I will check in with you after the meeting, Sara, to be sure you have the correct information, and let's get her back on.
Yeah,
great.
I'll take care of all that. I mean, I'm the one who maintains the list and stuff, so I've got that on my to-do list for sure.
Super, thanks, Sandra.
Is Josephine Morgan, is that the new president at Ledyard? Is that who that is? I think. Yeah. I could reach out to her. I mean, I can't tell her much because I just joined the group, but I have a conversation going with her about something else. And if we would like her to join on, I assume Kathy used to be on this group, Kathy Underwood? No?
No, but that would be great, Elizabeth.
Okay, so if you could send me like something to share with her, I'd be happy to do that.
Brooke, are you nodding that you'll do that?
You're on mute, Brooke.
Yep. Yes, I can sharing screen, finding you all. Yes, I can put together some language that
would be awesome.
That Elizabeth can use and anybody else.
Awesome. Thanks.
And does anybody have a contact with Amanda already? I've reached out to her about corporate counsel. I can do so unless somebody else wants, sort of knows her. I haven't really met with her yet personally.
I'm happy to reach out to Amanda. Sarah, I know her quite well. She was really
Great.
active with Sustainable Hanover in her original role with the co-op. So I will reach out to Amanda today,
Super.
and I'll CC Alan Reitz.
Great.
And I'd be happy to reach out to Jody Hoyt at Kendall. She had invited me to do that after giving her some space to get settled into her new job, which is the job that David Watts previously had.
Great.
Kim Smith from Hypertherm is involved in the recruitment and retention work group.
Okay, great.
Okay.
I'm trying to think about who at the tech school,
Well,
you know,
Paul
other
Mu-
than me reaching out to Matt Slaughter directly to tap somebody.
Paul Moutone, who's I think the CFO, is
Yeah.
on the corporate council.
Okay,
So I could reach out, or Julia, if you feel like you've got, yeah, I'm sure your connections are strong. So if you want to reach out, that would be great too.
yeah, I'll reach out to both Paul and Matt, Sarah.
Okay,
Um,
great,
Yeah,
super. We work with Nomad, so, and Brayshaw for that matter. I don't know Mark Schiffman personally, although they're donors to Vital Communities. But I'm happy to reach out to both Nomad and Brayshaw if unless others have personal connections. And same with Roger Arnold and Tracy Charlotte Davis are both on the municipal leaders group that we facilitate.
And I'd also offer, if there's a chance, because Sarah, you facilitate so many different groups, if we can bring our message to those groups and do a presentation. I know you and Andrew have done it for the corporate council, but for the municipal leaders, if there's an opportunity to do something similar, or the other groups that you're convening, the more bang for our buck as far as kind of getting the message out to multiple people at once.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe we could possibly do that a little bit later in the summer with Alex, Julia's replacement, coming on board and joining the group, I hope. So that might be good. Yeah,
I'm
that's a good
briefing
idea.
Alex next week on this, Sarah. So he'll get dragooned into the action. And I've already had one childcare provider, Brenda Danielson from Cradle to Crayon, has already left a message saying, I want to talk to the new town manager when he gets here, stat. So she's hot to trot. Hopefully she'll be a part of the retreat that you have in late July, because she's got lots of thoughts.
Great.
Great.
And
Others?
Amy has added one more in the chat.
From Hartford Schools.
Yep. Go for it. Go for it.
What about King Arthur? Are they represented in one of the other two working groups?
Charlotte Rutledge, I believe, was head baker, but couldn't find childcare or something. I'm not sure if that's the story.
And I think she was representing herself as a parent on the group, not representing, King Arthur.
It has been, we've really struggled to get King Arthur to engage regional efforts for years. And I don't know why. They've had a fair amount of turnover in on the human resources side, and that may be part of it. But it just FYI, they're hard to reel in for reasons that I don't fully understand.
I'd be happy to talk to Karen.
Yeah, I think that would be excellent, because
Okay.
it's just, many of us have tried over the years, and it's just frustrating, Sarah, because they don't want to engage.
Yeah. All right, there may be a hook. I'd be happy to try that one.
Can you indulge your note taker and Karen?
Karen Koberg.
And what's her role?
She is one of the co-presidents.
CEOs, co-CEO.
Co-CEO.
Yeah, they have this funky kind of co-CEO leadership system at King Arthur.
Any other names or sectors that are missing from this list, or even if we don't have a name, but an industry that should be included?
Did we pin somebody down for the town of Hartford?
Tracy Yarlett Davis is the town manager. And Sarah mentioned she and Roger Arnold from Norwich are on our municipal officials committee. So Tracy's a go-getter.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll reach out to her. I know she's stretched with a lot of, I think, turnover in staffing, but yes, I'll reach out to her. Maybe there's somebody on her team who could come if she can't.
Somebody noted Rotary, the Rotary clubs have been, at least Hanover Rotary has been stymied because of virtual meetings. But certainly reaching out to the president of the Hanover Rotary Club, Dave Allen, if you just, what I'll try and do, Andres, is send you his contact information. He's rotating off, I think, probably at the end of this month, and I don't know who the next president is going to be. I can't speak for Lebanon Rotary Chamber. That's Tracy Hutchins. I think Tracy's been active on one of the other committees, Sarah, for the Childcare Initiative, right?
I'm not sure about that, Andrea. No, I don't think so.
Tracy's not been? Okay.
She's certainly been helpful in getting the word out about things, but I don't think she's, so I could ask her.
I think Sean's tapped her a little bit to help with the Lebanon work that he's doing, but I'm not certain about that. I just got off our call, and after you signed off, Sarah, she mentioned something about it. So she's pretty plugged in, but and then PJ across the river in Hartford, he's pretty tapped with no staff, but
yeah.
Yeah.
I could reach out to Tracy and just see. Yeah.
Great. For the sake of time, I'm going to kind of keep us moving. And this is a active working document. So if there's more names that come to you kind of after this, please just send them along to Sarah and myself, and we'll make sure they get included. So I appreciate everybody's willingness to outreach, and my to-do is to give you some language to help you do that. All right, well, we can skip the updates from Let's Grow Kids and New Futures because we don't have them with us today. And then kind of moving on to the action needed, Sean Mulholland has developed a whiteboard. He's looking for community members to help with the brainstorming of how to create awareness and some advocacy strands for the property tax exemption legislation that he is proposing. So I have the link to kind of sign up to be part of that whiteboard working group or kind of brainstorming group. And I will put it in the chat once I can kind of, unless Andrea, you have it accessible, otherwise I'll pull it from my emails when I get a chance. All right, I am going to stop my share because we have our very special guest with us. There is Matt. Okay, we've got you, Matt. So I want to welcome Matt Levin to our call today. As we discussed 2 weeks ago, kind of there's the appetite to learn a little bit more about advocacy and how we can engage in advocacy kind of from a grassroots perspective. So Matt Levin, who's the ED of the Vermont Early Childhood Advocacy Alliance, is really kind of an expert in this this realm, and having done it and done it well, can provide a lot of insight and input and experience from what he's learned kind of on the ground in Vermont, but also applying it to a lens in New Hampshire, and more so kind of that our bi-state region. So I'm gonna, Matt, I will turn it over to you, but I'm grateful for your willingness to kind of join our group today and talk us through kind of an advocacy 101. Matt has some slides which we'll be sure to share with the larger group for those who aren't on the call today, but really we'll encourage, we are recording this, so there will be opportunity to kind of share this presentation more widely.
Great. Thanks, Brooke. Thanks for the introduction. And I'm happy to run my slides. If you want to make me a co-host, I can go ahead and run them. Thank you for this opportunity to talk to you all. It's interesting, every time I do this workshop, as I go through the introductory part, I think, do I have the right slide deck? Like, am I doing the right thing? And every time it's a little different. And I also realize the assumptions that I have brought and my staff has brought to the creation of the slide deck. And I realize I need to do an introduction to the introduction. So what we're about to run through is, in some ways, Advocacy 100. It's sort of one step before we get into the nuts and bolts of how legislation works and how things move through the legislature and all the rest, partly because we've got 2 different states, so that's a little confusing. But also because in talking with Sara, it seemed like sort of a bigger on-ramp would make sense to talk about this in general. But I also realized, listening to the conversation that you all were just having, I need to make it clear what it is we're talking about. This slide deck defines advocacy as talking to legislators about a piece of legislation or about a public policy concern that you have or something that's happening in your community. But it's specifically about talking to legislators. What you all were just talking about is also advocacy. It's the community organizing part of advocacy. It's the making connections in the community. It's building the start of your campaign or the strength of your campaign. It isn't necessarily at the beginning, but it's building the foundation of your campaign by reaching out to new communities and bringing more people in the conversation and having them understand what you're trying to do and bringing their energy and efforts into the larger cause. That's also advocacy. You won't see that in these slides. So this is specifically about the process that's focused on the state houses. It doesn't have to happen in the state houses, but it's about that activity. So I just want to preface it because I realize how narrowly focused this is. I think it's extremely valuable, but it doesn't include all advocacy. Many of the lessons that we talk about can be used in other situations, but I just want to acknowledge the fact that as I hear your conversation, I realize that this is a certain bias to it that is rather strong, and it doesn't mean, it's not meant to capture all the different ways that we do advocacy in the community. So, all right, so with that, I'm going to do a screen share. And we'll have the usual transition to something. I now have to go to start the screen, whoops, start the slides with the usual bumbling of trying to get started. So here we go. So this is the introduction to advocacy workshop. So I'm Matt Levin, the head of the Early Childhood Advocacy Alliance. We're a statewide coalition that focuses on advocacy for the early childhood community, all issues across the board from childcare, but nutrition, housing, mental health, physical health, economic security, the whole 9 yards. So here's an outline for the session today. And thank you to Sara for giving us the outline. And she said this to me in a conversation that we had a few weeks ago. This is what advocacy is. It's telling a story, which is a way of making a point, and you want to do it in a coordinated way. And hopefully you have the means and the tools to not be afraid to do it, because it's a little scary. It is. But the purposes of these workshops is to help you have that sense of comfort and confidence and knowledge that you're doing the right thing and you can do this, and away you go. So that's what we're going to go through each of these steps today. So there's just a little bit about us. Statewide coalition, initially formed in 2000, went through an evolutionary change in 2013. We focus on all these different issues. And the three main things we do: have a coalition, have an annual legislative agenda, and provide advocacy support through activities like this, as well as direct action and direct contact and listening in the State House in Vermont on behalf of the issues on our legislative agenda and the members of our coalition. We don't provide services. We don't have a background in any particular issue area. Our specialty is advocacy and working with communities and helping people have a voice in the process. That's what we do. So if folks have questions along the way, they can just go ahead and shout out. As usual, when you're doing screen share, you can't see everyone's faces. So just go ahead and sound out, and I'll pause. So the first part of this is telling a story. And I think the most important part of that is to emphasize that real people matter, that they really do. I'm a lobbyist. When I'm in the Vermont State House, I have to dress a certain way. I wear a name tag. I have a role to play in the drama. I am not a real person. I am paid to be there. I'm respected for my work, but I am paid to be there. Folks like you are not paid to be there. Even if you're doing this as part of your job, in most cases, you're not paid to be in the State House. So you are a real person with a real story. Legislators want to hear from you. And because of your connections, only you can provide that information and context that people like me can remind legislators of over and over and over again. One good contact from someone like you, whether it's in the field or at home or in the legislature, someone like me can use and amplify and magnify 3, 5, 10 times over. It's amazing how long the carry is from when the legislator hears a real world story, how I can see in my interactions with them, how much it's impacted them for weeks and weeks and weeks following. But I can't do that. Only you can. And we've seen that, as Brooke implied in her introduction to me, we've seen that over and over and over again. I speak from experience. It's amazing how much it matters. And only you all can do that. And that's why it really matters. So one of the reasons why that's so relevant in Vermont, in New Hampshire, is because the districts are so small. So in Vermont in particular, the districts are very small and legislators have no staff. I don't have experience in the New Hampshire State House, but my understanding is it's very similar. You can see from these maps, these are Upper Valley maps, that the districts are really tiny. You all know this, but it's worth remembering that the legislators represent such small groups of people, they can actually kind of know everyone in their district. I mean, most people don't, but you know, it isn't very much distance. And the Senate districts aren't that much bigger. And again, there's no staff. So there's no gatekeeper. It's just you to them, straight in, making a contact. And that makes a huge amount of difference. They're also real people. Now, these are all Vermont examples, but I'm sure it's the same in New Hampshire. So Representative Byron owns a restaurant in Virgins, and people go and talk to him all the time. David Zuckerman, candidate now, he's a farmer people in Chittenden County in the Burlington area know him as the long-haired hippie guy who they buy vegetables from. And Representative Chena is a DJ. These are all sort of Northwest Vermont examples, but they're great examples of how the people like Sara Kobylenski owns a coffee shop in Bradford, right? You can go and talk to her. She's not there now, she's out campaigning, but you know, they're right there. They're in our communities, they're real people. And so they have a way of being approachable that around the country is really pretty unique. People are very jealous of our system here in Northern New England and other parts of the country. So your goal when you're telling a story is to share something about your information, about your situation, but not too much. So these are reminders that you're not an expert. So you're not supposed to be able to answer all the questions. That's okay. You need to give them a little bit of the context as well as the story. So why doing this? But not too much. You have to stay focused. You can't tell your whole story. You don't have to say everything. As I'll say later, it's a team sport, right? Your job is not to say everything. Your job is to tell enough about your story so the legislator says, wow, I never thought of it that way. Or, gee, that's an interesting aspect of this that hasn't occurred to me before. If you're doing sort of real person advocacy and you have a legislator say that, you should just stop because you've won. Like, you've done your job. If you got the legislator to have a light bulb go on over their head about something you're talking about, you have done your job. You should say thank you and just wrap up because you've just done a huge positive thing. Obviously, you could talk to them more, but that's your goal, right? Is to have the light bulb go on and have them say, wow, I never thought about it that way before. It's not to tell them everything about your situation or everything about the issue or every aspect of the bill. That's just too much for anyone to do. And it's not humanly possible. And so you have to remind yourself of that. Share a little bit, but not too much. And this gets to our 3 key phrases. We have a different version of this workshop, which is more the 101 version, where we get into the mechanics of lobbying and how the legislation works, and we do some role plays and all that kind of stuff. And I can come back and do that anytime. But this again, this sort of entry level or sort of on-ramp version felt like the right one to do, given the time constraints that we had today and everything else. So the second and third things are particularly important. Your job is to be compelling, not comprehensive, right? You want to get the light bulb to turn on, not tell them everything. And remember, it's a team sport. We'll come back to this. I say it a lot on these slides. There are other people doing this activity. It's not just you alone. So you don't have to feel like you have to tell the whole story or cover every point. It doesn't work. It's not humanly possible. And it's important for your sense of confidence. That gets to number 4, right? It's okay. It's a little scary, but you can do this. If you feel like you're only taking a small part of the effort, it's easier to do this with confidence, right? If you feel like you're carrying the whole load, who wouldn't feel overwhelmed by that, right? I feel overwhelmed by that. So just remember, it's a team sport. There are other people doing it. You just have to take a small part and do a little bit. Okay, so making a point. A little preparation goes a long way, right? You're thinking about telling your story, but now you need to help yourself focus a little bit. So I thought of this the other day. It's meant to be kind of funny. The goal of your storytelling is to make a point, but in order to have a point, but you have to have a point to make a point, right? If you don't know what your point is, you can't make a point. So you have to remember what your point is. And it's probably good to practice a little bit to say, so my point is, and say it. Literally, like stand in front of the mirror and practice. So my point is blank, and it should be one sentence, not a paragraph. Because again, your job is to be compelling, not comprehensive. So these are things you have to practice. This is, most people don't just do this. It takes practice, and that's okay. So again, the goal here is to increase your chances of success. So team sport, whatever it is that you're working on, someone's almost certainly already working on It's part of a bill, it's part of an initiative, it's part of a campaign, and there's some committee or organization that's working on it, that has got something happening. It's helpful to understand all that a little bit first. This isn't to say that you need to understand the minutia of the politics of a committee room about why one amendment is being considered and not another. It's not that, but you should at least have some sense of what's going on so that when you have this brief conversation with a legislator, because it's probably going to be brief, you can put your comments in the context of what's going on. Again, that increases your chances of success. We've seen it time and time again that people who rush into the State House and say, I need to talk to you about that, and just talk about something without, you can just watch it. You can watch a legislator just tune it out. They have too much going, it doesn't help them. You have to put it in the context of whatever it is that they can relate to and make it work for them a little bit. Again, we'll come back to that towards the end of the slides. So this is part of the stuff that we go into in more depth in the longer workshop. It's good to know a little bit about how bills become laws. This is the Vermont version. The New Hampshire version is a little bit different. It's good to have an understanding of this. We're not going to talk about this today. It's just to point out that there is a process and it's good to know what it is. Similarly, there are committees and the committees have jurisdiction about different issues. It's good to have an understanding of that. New Hampshire's situation is different than Vermont. This is the Vermont page. There's a different process in each state. There are people who understand it. Talk to them a little bit, have a sense of what's going on, practice with them what your point is, make sure that it makes sense to them. There are all these things going on in the background. It's good to understand what they are. That increases your chance of success. So again, being coordinated, team sport. You should know who the lead organization is. Now, in Vermont, for our issues, we have, it's not a formal agreement, but it's a pretty formal thing. I could tell you who the lead organization is for each of the issues on our legislative agenda. And this is not a term that I made up. This is how we refer to things in the State House. And it's been that way in the 20 years I've worked there. Whatever the issue is, you could ask the lobbying world, who's lead on that? And they'll tell you either the name of the lobbyist and or the name of the organization. We all know who the leads are on bills and issues. And there's often two different ones. There's like a pro and a con, right? There's the lead of those in favor and the lead of those against sometimes. You should know who that is and have some sense of connecting with them. Again, this is about increasing your chances of success. So if you're participating in a coordinated effort, you're going to do better. Some of you have heard in other workshops, I talk about like my nightmare scenario. So it's so hard to get people to come to the Vermont State House. It's such a big thing. You have to take time off from work, you have to travel, you have to park, you have to, we love it when people come to the State House. We want them to succeed. We'll red carpet treatment, right? So I was at a training workshop, this was like 8 years ago, and someone raised their hand and said, I have a question. And I said, yes. And they said, so I was going to the State House one day and I was by myself and I wasn't sure. And I stopped her. No, as you can tell, I'm very theatrical. I stopped her and I was like, wait a minute, you what? And she was all, and this was in person. So it was different chemistry. And she was kind of taken aback. And I said, no, it's okay. But did you just say you went to the State House alone? And she said, well, yeah. And I said, no, you should have told me. Oh, no, I don't mean to make you feel bad. But if any of you are coming to the State House, I got all, energetic. If any of you are coming to the State House, just tell us. We'll help you park. We'll help you get in the door. We'll tell you where to hang your coat. We'll show you around the building. Right? We'll help you find the legislators you're looking for. We'll connect you with the lead organization. I mean, our organization is here to make those connections happen as much as possible. And a lot of other campaigns have the same thing. So in our world in Vermont, if you're coming to the State House, let's grow kids. If you're doing it on the childcare, if you're doing it on childcare and early childhood education, they'll roll out the red carpet for you. They would love to have you come and to host you. So we really want to help make it an easy experience. Sorry, I'm getting all pumped up. So you've heard these before, compelling, not comprehensive. You're not the expert. and you want to have a point that's part of a larger effort. You'll notice that a lot of this is kind of repetitive. That's because there are just a few points that just come up in different ways. It works. The reason why we repeat these things is because they really help. They help people feel more comfortable because, I haven't gotten to that. I'm getting ahead of myself. So we're the lead organizations on a number of issues. Again, every issue on our legislative agenda has a lead organization identified. I wasn't aware of the situation in New Hampshire enough, so I just put this sort of placeholder in. But
well, part of the problem is New Hampshire has had no clarity, but Michael Bennett put in the chat a note about an announcement that got made within the last 48 hours that New Futures and Save the Children are planning to launch a 10-year campaign around early care and education, but sort of like nothing is known about this yet. And this wasn't known by any of the other advocates, 72 hours ago.
So that's sort of a yellow flag there, eh?
Well, you kind of wonder.
Yeah. So in Vermont, we've been doing this for a while. So we've got it pretty well down. So you can see even within the early care and education piece, this is segmented out. That when it comes to the financing and subsidy piece, that's Let's Grow Kids. When it comes to professional development and pay, that's Vermont AEYC. And when it comes to CIS and specialized childcare, that's us, because there's no one else to do it. It's not a great situation in some ways, but we're a stand-in because the specialized childcare and CIS world is all fractured all over the place in different organizations. So there's no one statewide organization to take the lead. But we've got this segmented out. So if someone called LGK and said, well, I really have questions about CIS and I want to help get more funding, what do I do? They would immediately say, call Matt. And they very pleasantly send the person my way. And if someone called me and said, I really want to talk about pay for teachers, why isn't it higher? What can I do? I said, well, there are folks at Vermont AEYC that would love to talk to you about that. Let me get you their information. And we send them right over. So this is an added slide that we just put in. So I haven't run through it yet, but I think it's going to work. You want to be clear who you are representing. Again, the context for this workshop is advocacy directed at legislators, whether it's in the State House or by a phone call or email or at the sideline of a soccer game or whatever. That's this context. It's also probably true when you talk about the phone calls that you all were just describing. Who's calling King Arthur Flower, right? No. Anytime you're doing advocacy, you really should be clear about exactly who you are representing. It's sort of good hygiene, but it's going to pay off in the end because you're going to avoid awkward situations, you're going to avoid confusion, and to repeat a phrase, you're going to put yourself in a position to be successful, right? We want to increase your chances of success. If you know who you are and who you're representing, you're going to be more effective in communicating and sharing your information. So if you're an individual citizen, you'd say something like, from my personal experience. If you're a member of a group that's taken a position, you'd say, my organization has gone through a process and blank. If you're the leader of an organization, you can say it a little bit more assertively. My coalition believes that blank. You can put it right out there. But you want to make sure that you're comfortable doing what you're doing and that the legislators who are hearing you can place your comments appropriately. It's an important subtlety and nuance to this that, again, it takes practice and good hygiene. It's like washing your hands. I mean, you have to remember to do it. It's not, most of us aren't, healthcare professionals or work in a kitchen where it's just habitual to wash your hands every 5 minutes because that's what you do. You have to remember to do it. That's okay. Wearing a name tag helps. There are these little clues that help you remember, right, I'm here as blank. It's a good thing to think about as you proceed in your advocacy journey. Again, all this is about helping you succeed, seeing yourself succeeding, not being afraid. It's a strong word, afraid, but I think it's important to put it out there. this is a personal thing for people. People are afraid of it. That's okay. That's okay. That's one reason why I put this first point first. It's okay if it's not for you. That's not a problem. I'm not going to be mad at you. It's okay. It's a team sport. There are other things you can do, and maybe you try it some other time. It's all right. So people do this all the time. We've watched dozens, hundreds of people come into the State House and do this, and we're here to help, right? So the first picture here is pictures of real people doing this work in the Vermont State House. And the second picture is of me doing a training session in the State House for people from Central Vermont. I mean, this is what we do. It's okay. Like, it takes practice. It's fun. Or, it's not. And then that's okay too. So you can share your story in lots of different ways. So this is a picture of Representative Emily Kornheiser at a campaign event, actually, I think, but talking to people, obviously appreciating the interaction. Emily loves to hear stories from real people. She's a totally approachable legislator. She's a bad example because she's so approachable. She's so easy to talk to. There are other legislators who are a little harder to talk to. That's okay too. There are a lot of ways to talk to them in the State House, in the community, email, text, phone. I don't know what the best way is. It's about building a relationship with the legislator and determining how they like to hear from you. That takes a little bit of time. But at the end of the day, again, you should trust that legislators want to hear from you because they do. They really, really do. They really do. So I'm about out of time. I just want to mention that when we talk about this work, we talk about the spectrum of engagement, that most of us start as constituents, which is the person who you're talking to, a legislator that represents you because you either live or work in their district, and they have to be nice to you because you're a constituent. But we encourage folks to move through the spectrum to get to the right side of the arrows here, which is being an advocate, which is someone who is thought of as a leader in the community and someone whose opinion and information matters to a legislator, regardless of where you live or where they represent. And again, we've seen many people move through this process, recognizing that you start, for most of us, as someone who doesn't really have a relationship, except that you're a voter in their district. But as you do these activities, you can become a very different kind of player in the drama. This is the single most important thing from the legislator's point of view, this sentence. Successful connections with legislators rely on, come from repeated quality interactions on the legislator's own terms at times when they are most approachable. Unfortunately, it really is about them. It would be nice if it wasn't, but it is. That's just the human reality of the situation. They have thousands of people trying to talk to them every day, at least hundreds, dozens, too many. They have too many people trying to talk to them every day. They can't possibly talk to everyone in the way that they would like to. And we have to acknowledge that and appreciate that they're doing a difficult thing and try to make it work for them and do it more than once in a way that works for them. That's the pleasant, patient, persistent mantra that we use.
Matt, on that one, I had an interesting experience once in which I was wanting to talk to a legislator who represented me where I lived on a topic, and it kept brushing me off. And I finally said, I'm your constituent. This matters to me. He said, oh, I don't know anything about that. I'm not interested in that. And at that point, instead of just walking away, I said, well, how do you know how to vote on those things? And he said, oh, I just do what this other legislator does if it's a topic like that. I figured they know. So I went to that other legislator and said, do you know the legislator A doesn't know anything about this and is voting however you vote? Legislator B had no idea. And I said, but since he considers you an expert, can I talk to you about this since you now become my voice? It was a little crazy.
Well, now to go back. So Sarah's cheating because she actually plays she has multiple spots on this spectrum here that she can play. So that's like advocacy 202, Sarah. That's very clever. But I think that's a really good story, right? That, pleasant, patient, persistent, right? But also team play. So if that happened to you and you got the brush off and you were working with me, you'd come back to me and report in, right? And say, so what happened? And they'd say, well, legislator A blew me off. They said they only listened to legislator B, who I don't know. And I'd say, great, I know them. Let's go. And I'd help you go find legislator B. And I'd say, hi, Representative B, I have a story to tell you. Will you spend 30 seconds listening to what this nice person who's a citizen advocate who's trying to do this, be nice to them? Will you please listen to their story? And you tell their story. And legislator B would say, really? Oh, and then we'd have a conversation, right? So there are a lot of things to learn from that story. One is that when you become more comfortable with the system, you can start to play different roles and do different things. Another is the team sport concept, which is that's a really valuable piece of information that you've just discovered. Bring it back to the team and report it in, and we can work with you to figure out what to do with it. Or maybe you don't want to talk to legislator B. That's okay. We can have someone else talk to legislator B. But now we know that there's this connection between legislator A and legislator B, which we didn't know before, which could be really helpful. Exactly. So we do this because it makes a difference. This is a picture of the wonderful folks at the Junior League of Champlain Valley, who are the sponsors, supporters, coordinators, the statewide diaper bank. Because of their advocacy, they secured funding to keep the diaper bank going statewide during the pandemic and for the next fiscal year. That's making a difference in the lives of so many Vermont children and families. And it's because of their advocacy, they persuaded legislators to find money to give to their program to help it survive for another year. It really makes a difference. And real stories from real people change the decisions of the legislature all the time. So here's our contact information. I can put it in the chat as well. That's the end of this slideshow. So I'm going to stop the share. And I'm happy to answer questions or talk to folks or work with Sara and Brooke to do this again another time. I can do it for you personally. I'd be happy to run through it again with any of you. This is what we do. We love to do it. We're happy to talk to folks anytime about all this information.
Would you mind emailing me these slides and I'll include them with the notes?
Yes, I think Brooke, Sara has them. So yeah.
Thank you, Matt.
I'll email them to you as well. So
okay. No, I thank you. This is such a helpful overview and a reminder about kind of why we're here and the importance of the advocacy component to this overall work of the Vital Communities Initiative. And I think we all have those stories, but to bring them to the forefront and to recognize there is an impact in sharing them and to kind of create that space and that emphasis to share and that reminder is really helpful. So I appreciate that. And I think that can kind of be an ongoing kind of charge of this group is to collect those stories and to highlight opportunities for individuals to share their stories on behalf of this work group. And to always connect it back to the children too.
Right. You always want to connect it back to children and families. I guess the one thing I'd say, just to add some nuance to part of this, is that it is really important to share stories, but you want to be sort of self-aware about what you're doing. There's a certain period of time in the relationship where it's helpful to provide background information and to share stories because they help a legislator understand what's going on. And there are certain times where there's been a crisis or a change, and so new stories are necessary to help them understand what the current context is. But there's also a lot of the time when actually they don't need to hear more stories. What they need to hear is what you want to do about it. Mm-hmm. And so, or so what, or so my point is. Mm-hmm. Well, in order to do that, you have to have a point, right? So part of what we do is gently nudge our compatriots, and this isn't about this conversation. We do this all the time with all different issues. So please don't feel like you're special and unique. Because we're so focused on advocacy, we're in a position to continually say to our members, our partners, or coalitions, what is it you're trying to do? What's the solution? Because if you aren't talking about the solution, at least, I don't know, a third of the time, you're not talking about it enough. And if you don't have a solution to talk about, then you need to stop until you have one. Because just talking about a problem after a while actually starts to hurt you when it comes to advocacy, because then you're just like complainers and whiners. That's just human nature, right? That's not judgment. That's because, think about your friendships with people. Like we all have one friend who we'll just listen to forever. We have room in our life for one friend like that, right? But after that, you're like, I can't just listen to you just endlessly complain. I'm happy to help you figure out how to solve this problem, but I just can't, it's the same sort of thing with legislators. So you have to make sure that you have a solution in mind that's at least half-baked, that you are introducing in the conversation as well. So yes, we want you to collect stories. We want you to share the stories, but it's our job to gently remind you that that needs to be spiced, share a little bit of the space with the solution story as well. And if you don't have that, again, you should stop and work on getting it, and then you can start the storytelling again.
No, that's such an important point, because especially in the ECE world, the crisis, the problem has been elevated and repeated, and I think, well, people are pretty well aware that there is a crisis, and what's muckier are the solutions, and those get lost. And part of our charge is to pull out potential solutions and then kind of wrap our advocacy around that and our stories around elevating those solutions and pointing to kind of, even if it's a little project that's kind of bubbling up versus potential legislation, and really kind of galvanize around various solutions and focus attention there.
Right, and I want to empower you all as individual advocates in this way. I would love it if you so internalize this workshop that you said to yourself, I need to have my point. What's my point? I don't have a point. I need to have one. So I'm being sort of self-congratulatory that you've absorbed the workshop so much that you've taken it to heart. Right? You all should feel empowered to go to team sport, right? Team sport, go to the leads of the teams and whatever, and say, what's my point? Like, I'm ready to go, and you haven't given me a point. I'm a childcare provider. I'm a specialized childcare coordinator. I spend all my time just making sure kids have whatever they need. I don't have time to figure out the answer. I can make 5 minutes to talk to a legislator. I now have a great story, except I have no point. So what is it that you all can put pressure on the organizations that are part of this story to gently nudge them, particularly in New Hampshire, to give you a potential solution that you can support and push for, right? I mean, in Vermont, we have it, but on the other hand, we don't. And people need to keep reaching out to LGK, because this is a good part of the process, and saying to LGK, so what's the solution? What am I trying to push now? Like what? And if you don't like it, you should tell them, like, okay, I did this and I tried to sell it and it didn't work, or I'm uncomfortable with it, or it was great and it worked and I loved it and legislators got it, or they got this part of it, but not that part of it, right? The solution part of the equation is an interactive process itself. And so if it's helpful for folks just like you all, and I know the New Hampshire conversation is complicated, so I'm not trying to launch you into some big internal soap opera, but work with Amy and Brooke and Sara and Andrew and the other people who are part of this conversation to try to lean into, I hate that phrase, to lean on the people who are supposed to be providing you with the answers, to encourage them to get to the answers, because you can't do good advocacy if you don't have the "and so my point is" part of the script. and you should ask for it. And feel comfortable asking for it. You're not harassing them. You're trying to help them, right? You're not doing them a favor, but you're the good guys. You're supposed to be helping. You're trying to help. So ask for what you need to be helpful. That's helpful. It's a little annoying sometimes, but that's okay. It's helpful.
No, it's an important reminder because that's where we get stuck.
Right.
And
Matt,
where we,
Yeah. Matt, I wanted to ask, is there anything that you know of that would be comparable for the New Hampshire side, even if it didn't focus specifically on ECE or childhood issues, early childhood issues? What I'm thinking about is if we put this up on our this slide deck up on our website, if okay with you, I think it's a tremendous resource. I'm wondering about comparable, at least for the sort of the structure slides that you put up that were, I think, very helpful. Do you know of any organization that's done that sort of layout for the New Hampshire side?
No, I don't, but
it's too complicated, right?
yeah.
No. Well, I mean, that's partly ignorance or lack of knowledge on my part. I mean, I have been very careful to only go where I've been invited to go. So yeah, I mean, New Futures might have something, as Brooke just said in the chat. There are a number. The New Hampshire context is very complicated. That's partly because of complications that the advocacy community has brought on itself. It takes a great deal of discipline and time to get the kind of discipline that we have in the early childhood community in Vermont. But I would say it's also, there's a similar I mean, what's interesting is that those of us who do this, I don't work with other issue areas, but one of my main compadres, Amy Schollenberger, does work in other issue areas. And we've been doing this for 20 years together. And we have brought this sense of discipline to essentially the whole sort of lefty lobbying community in Vermont, because this is how we do our work. And we're, slightly evangelical about it. And Amy has clients. I mean, so there's a whole sort of community of practice that's developed in the Vermont State House around this kind of disciplined sensibility. And my sense that it doesn't exist quite in the same way in New Hampshire.
Yeah. I have two questions that are not going to be answered, but I'm just going to put them out there just so, because I'd love to kind of circle back with you later to just learn more in depth about one. Kind of in Vermont, the advocates have done a good job of kind of staying in their lane and defining what their lane is. And I would have loved to kind of hear what that process was and how that evolved. And then second is getting business voice engagement on the issues and how you've cultivated connections with the business community and how you've leveraged the business community to help advance your advocacy efforts.
Right. So how much time do I have?
We don't. So I'm putting those out there.
So, well, I'll be really brief.
Yeah.
We, in Vermont, it came through failure and experience. And again, a few people really trying to be disciplined about it. The environmental community had a huge internal failure on this same thing that I was involved with 15 years ago. And that informed the environmental community's untangling and helped me untangle the early childhood community's tanglement. It takes a lot of discipline, a lot of time, and me repeating the lane concept over and over and over again everywhere I go. And the executive directors of the organizations appreciating and wanting to be part of that lane setting, right? we could talk more about that. The
Okay.
business community, we have formal places in the Alliance for the business community. So we have an organization from the business community on our board. And Let's Grow Kids has an extensive outreach effort that they're undertaking with the business community. I would just say that I think that that's the business community outreach is an inherently complex, complicated, and fraught relationship, because what the business community wants is fundamentally different than what the service and nonprofit community wants. It's and often conflicting, but not necessarily, but it's a different language, a different vocabulary, a different culture. And so you need to be really careful about how you try to bring them together, because they have to be side by side. They can't be mixed. It's a different conversation. But again, that's something I'd be more than happy to talk about at any time. And this whole question about New Hampshire and setting up similar structures in New Hampshire, figuring out, I mean, I'm happy to work on that project over the summer and fall. Just need to have the right entree and the right table set so we can have a good conversation that's productive and doesn't feel sort of invasive or, parachuted in.
Great. Appreciate that. Well, I really appreciate you coming and sharing with us today and taking time out of your morning. It was really helpful, and we will kind of share this presentation far and wide, because it's a good reminder to us all that sharing our stories, having a point, and being a team.
Yep, it's hard work. Takes a lot of practice.
And this group will not be meeting 2 weeks from now. So it'll be 4 weeks before we meet again.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you again, Matt. Yeah.
My pleasure. Again, really, reach out anytime, folks. I'm happy to talk about this more in whatever context makes sense. Don't hesitate to drop me an email. Happy to talk.
It was great.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Friday, everybody.
Yeah, happy.
Take care.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.